Harlon Nayla's eyes didn't so much as blink as the fist came at him. His left hand went out, tilting inwards, captured the man's arm neatly around the inside of the wrist, and wrenched it right round through 200 degrees. A bone may have snapped, but if it did, the sound was masked by the man's strangled squeal, a noise which ended suddenly as Nail's other hand connected with his face. The man, a thick-set lotus eater with a mucus problem, shivered the deck as he hit it. Nail kept hold of his wrist, pulling the man's arm straight and tight while he stood firmly on his armpit. This position allowed for significant leverage, and Nail made use of it. Harlon was in a take-no-prisoners mood, I sensed, which was hardly useful given our objective. A little leverage and rotation. A ghastly scream, vocalized through a face spattered with blood. "What do you reckon?" asked Nail, twisting a little more and increasing the pitch. "Do you think I can get top C out of him?" "Should I care?" replied Morpaul, who moves with mannered disinterest. "You can twist Manx's arm right off and beat him round the head with it. He still won't tell you what you want. He's a lowbrow. He knows nothing." Nail smiled, twisted, got another shriek. "Of course he is. I worked that much out from his scintillating conversation. But one of you does. One of you knows the answer I want. Sooner or later, his screams will aggravate you so much, you'll tell me." Morpaul, who moves, had a face like a crushed walnut. He sat back in his satin-upholstered buoy chair and fiddled with a golden-rind shriver, a delicate tool that glittered between his bony fingers. He was weighing up what to say. I could read the alternatives in his forebrain like the label on a jar. "This is not good for business." "Sir, this is my place of business, and I don't take kindly to." "Throne of Earth, who the frig do you think you are?" Morpaul's place was a 4-hectare loading dock of iron, stock brick, and timber, hinged out over the vast canyon gulf of the West Descent, an aerial thoroughfare formed by the gap between two of the hive's most colossal stacks. Beneath the reinforced platform and the Gothic buttresses that supported it, space dropped away for almost a vertical kilometer to the base of the stacks. Ostensibly, this was a ledge where cargo flitters and load transporters, and many thousands of these craft plied the airways of the West Descent, could drop in for repairs, fuel, or whatever else the pilots needed. But Morpaul was a fence and racketeer, and the transience of the dock's traffic gave him ample opportunity to steal, replace, backhand, smuggle, and otherwise run his lucrative trade. More than 20 men stood in a loose group around Harlon. Most were stevedores and dock laborers in Morpaul's employ. The others were flit pilots, gig men, hoy drivers, and riggers who'd stopped in for caffeine, fuel, and a game of cards. Many of them regulars who were into Morpaul for more than a year's salary each. All this and more was visible from their collective thoughts, which swirled around the loading dock like a fog. I was 5 kilometers away, in a room in a low-rent hotel. But it was all clear enough. I knew what Mingus Futir had eaten for breakfast, what Fancyman Decree had stolen the night before, the lie Gert Garrity had told his wife. I knew all about the thing Eric Klass didn't want to tell Morpaul. Wystan Frauke sat beside me, smoking a low stick, his limiter activated. He was reading a tremendously tedious erotic novel on his slate. Surface was easy, deep mind was harder. Morpaul, who moves, and his cronies were well used to concealing their secrets. That was why Harlon had gone in first. Morpaul finally arrived at a decision. He had determined, I sensed, to take the moral high ground. "This is not how things are done on my platform," he told Harlon. "This is a respectable establishment." "Yeah, right," snorted Nail. "One last time, what can you tell me about Victor Zahn?" "He worked here once, before he went off-planet. I know he worked here, because I had the records checked out. So tell me about Victor." "Victor Zahn hasn't been around in 5 years," Morpaul said. "Tell me about him anyway," Nail snapped. "I really don't see any reason to do that." "I'll show you one." Nail reached his free hand into his hip pocket, took something out and threw it down onto the cup-ringed, grimy tabletop. His badge of authority, the signet crest of the Inquisition. Immediately all the men took a step back, alarmed. I felt Morpaul's mind start in dismay. This was the kind of trouble no one wanted. Unless... "Damn it," I said. Frauke looked up from the midst of his book's latest loveless tryst. "What's up?" "Morpaul, who moves, is about to make a miscalculation." "Oh dear," said Frauke, and turned back to his novel. Morpaul had run the dock for 46 years, For all his misdeeds and misdemeanors, some of them serious, he'd never run foul of the law, apart from the odd fine or reprimand. He actually thought he could deal with this and get away with it. Harlon, Morpal's signal will be a double finger click. Your immediate threat is the gray-haired gig man to your left, who has a dart knife. To his right, in the leather apron, the rigger has a pivot gun, but he will not be able to draw it as fast. The flit pilot in green wants to prove himself to Morpal, and he won't hesitate. His friend, the one with the obscura-tinted eyes, is less confident, but he has a boom gun in his cab. "Well?" Harlon Nayla asked. Morpal, who moves, clicked both middle fingers. I flinched at the sudden flare of adrenaline and aggression. A great part of it came from Nail. The rigger in the leather apron had drawn his pivot gun, but Nail had already stoved the table in with the face of the gray-haired gig man and relieved him of his dart knife. Nail threw himself around as the pilot in green lunged forward and slam-kicked him in the throat. The pilot went down, choking, his larynx crushed, as the pivot gun finally boomed. The homemade round whipped high over Nail's head as he rolled and triggered the dart knife. The spring-propelled blade speared the rigger through the center of his leather apron, and he fell over on his back, clawing at his belly. Others plowed in, one striking Nail in the ribs with an 8 wrench. "Ow!" Nail grunted and laid the man out. The Obscura fiend was running across the platform towards his hoy. Nail threw another man aside and grabbed the edges of Morpal's buoy chair. The mover yelled in dismay as Nail slung the frictionless chair sideways. It sped across the platform like a quoit, knocking 2 of the stevedores over and slammed hard against the dock's restraining rail. The serious impact dazed Morpal. He slumped forward. Nail backfisted a man in the nose and then punched out another who was trying to flee anyway. 2 front teeth flew into the air. The Obscura fiend had his hoy's door open, reaching in.
A stevedore with a hatchet swung at Nail, forcing him to jump back. Nail blocked the next swing with his forearm, fractured the man's sternum with a jab, and threw him with a crash into the nearby row of porcelain samovars. The Obscura addict turned from his cab and racked the grip of his boom gun. He brought it up to fire. Nail slid the Hecutor 10 from his body glove and calmly shot him through the head at 15 meters. Blood splashed up the rusted fender of the hoy. The man cannonied backwards, dropping the boom gun from dead fingers. The rest of them scattered. Kara ran onto the platform, her weapon raised. It had taken her just 30 seconds to move out of cover at my command to back up Nail, but the fight was already done. "Don't leave any for me, then," she complained. "You should have been here," Nail said. He walked over to the rig and picked up the fallen boom gun, examining it. "Nice," he said. "Harlon." Nail looked over at Morpal, who was just coming round. The back of his buoy chair rammed against the platform's rail. He saw Nail, saw him aiming the weapon. Harlon. No. But Nail's blood was up. The need for vengeance, suppressed for so long, was finally finding an outlet. Nail fired. Morpal had ducked. The shot exploded the seat back above him, and the rail behind. The force of the impact drove the buoy chair backwards. Intact, unscathed, but still sitting in his chair, Morpal, who moves, went backwards, toppled, and fell into the interstack gulf. "Well, damn," Nail hissed, "for throne's sake, Nail. I told you not to." Thonius had just walked into the hotel room behind me. "Good book?" he asked Frauke. "Saucy," Frauke replied, not looking up. "Nail's just ruined our lead." "Never mind," Thonius grinned, a smug satisfaction on his face. "It was pointless anyway. I found a much better one."